Morning everyone, and what a great privilege it is to be here today to deliver the Grey Memorial Lecture, hopefully less memorial. And the interesting thing is I stand before you as the product of a grey boy and a collegiate girl, not while they were at school, I'll have you know. It happened that afternoon. My late mother would not have appreciated that joke, I can assure you. So I'm going to be talking about how problems are essential to purpose, and I've found that to be one of the enduring truths in my life. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey of the values and the people that I've encountered in my life that have been particularly important. And then, being an ad man, I'm also going to show you some work, which will probably be the fun part of the presentation. So indeed, had my sons gone to Grey, their father went to Grey, both their grandfathers went to Grey. In fact, my father-in-law, Vigilante, is a Grey boy, he's sitting right there. And two of my sons' great-grandfathers went to Grey. So it's a great sadness for me that my boys aren't going to have the privilege of attending this incredible school. And so many of the lessons that I picked up in the school, and I shared with the boys earlier today, come from these very halls. My grandfather, who went to Grey, matriculated at the age of 16, and he hopped on a boat off to London to go to the Royal College of Dental Surgeons. Now, in those days, there was no FaceTime, there was no Skype, there was no mobile phones or internet. So he kind of said goodbye to his family at 16 for 7 years and saw them at the age of 23 for the first time again. And when he returned, he was a dentist and he was a maxillofacial surgeon. And he started his dental practice. And firstly into his dental practice, the drill bit flew off and blinded him in one eye. Now, if you're a dentist, depth perception is very important to you. And so he trained his nurses to compensate for his depth perception. And then he was taken by the South African Medical and Dental Council, by the dentists in Port Elizabeth, for bringing a machine to PE called dental x-rays. And they felt that this Jewish dentist was trying to fleece his customers through having this unnecessary machine. Needless to say, he won that case, and dental x-rays have been in PE for a long time, thanks to my grandfather. But just seeing the way he dealt with adversity, he despised the apartheid government, quite rightfully. And so every Thursday, he would go down to the Livingston Hospital and he would work there for the entire day. As some of you will recall, it was the Black Hospital in PE, and he'd operate for free for 40 years on those patients. And so I took a lot of inspiration from his example in life and learning to revile apartheid in all of its forms as I grew up. And that informed my life a lot. And then my father, when he finished Grey, Bernie Abel, he got on a rickety plane and he flew to Israel. Israel in those days was only 8 years old as a country and faced annihilation from all of its neighbouring countries. The reason he left the comfort of Port Elizabeth to go to Israel to fight was it was only 11 years after the Holocaust. And my grandmother is a Polish woman. She came here with her family at the age of 24. And so my father well understood the implications of Israel being annihilated and what perils could await his own family. So having such a brave father and grandfather and a truly inspirational mother in many ways, I learned a lot. But they were Grey boys. And what I thought is that the foundation, very proud Grey boys that they got here, is that a Grey foundation is actually a great foundation in life. So all of you whose kids are here, and Dave, thank you very much for those kind words. I do wish my boys were at the school as well. I remember just up in the high school, we had a very crusty Irish teacher called Seamus Maloney. I'm sure it brings back some memories to the boys. And Seamus taught us this poem, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori, which translated into English means it is sweet and honourable to die for one's country. And when Seamus taught us that poem, he said it was the greatest lie of all. But given the history, as I shared about my father, I don't think that dying for one's country in all instances is indeed the greatest lie of all. But Wilfred Owen, who was the poet that wrote it, and who died in the trench warfare of the First World War, wrote that every night as he stood in the trenches, he was faced with a decision. He could either look down and see his feet in the mud, or he could look up and see the stars. And I've taken that inspiration, that no matter what life has thrown at me, we always have a deliberate choice. Do we look down or do we look up? Another teacher that gave me something that I've carried with me throughout my life is Jock Cullen. Not all of those, I see Johnny Hill laughing at the back there, not all of those lessons were pleasant. But what Jock did ask us one day is, what do we understand by the word faith? And after none of us, as usual, could provide Jock with an adequate answer, he said, faith is sitting on a chair. You sit on a chair without thinking twice about it. But the day you sit down on a chair and it gives way underneath you, you never quite sit on a chair the same way again. And I took that profound lesson with me because I think it pertains to marriage, I think it pertains to parenting, I think it pertains to friendship, and I think it pertains to business. That what Jock was talking about is emotional reliability, consistency, being there for people, being that chair in life. So the Seamus story and the Jock Cullen story are just two stories that remain with me and guide me on this journey. I like this quote about Winston Churchill, that it's not enough to have lived. We should be determined to live for something. And 16 years ago, I had a major health scare. I think and that was the point in my life at which I determined that I wanted to lead a more purposeful life. It was fine to do well materially and to enjoy a modicum of success, but to make a difference in the world wherever I could. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the values and some of the thoughts that guide the way I choose to live my life and what I try to impart on my staff and on my kids. Last week we had Bruce Whitfield in my Johannesburg company talking to the executives there. And he was talking about the glass half full. He said it's an interesting observation as he meets with CEOs around South Africa, is they're all talking about whether the glass is half full or half empty. He said, but few of those CEOs ever reach out and drink what's in the glass. And I think it's a very interesting insight, not to be an observer in your own life or to be analyzing your own life, but to be drinking whatever is in that frigging glass at any point in time. And certainly enough of that went down last night as we shared our 35th. So the first thing that I want to talk about is a sharing culture. Unfortunately in South Africa, I don't think we have been raised to believe in sharing. And what I mean by that is I've always believed it's better to have a small part of something extraordinary than a large part of something ordinary. And so I'm very comfortable in terms of how I've grown my business as a minor shareholder in my own company that I started from scratch, and being able to build society and build other people's lives than having a massive part of something that I would have deemed to have been quite an ordinary company. So the first business I started was in 1988. I was 21 years old at the time, and I was a particularly poor surfer amongst friends that could surf rather well, and my cousin Barry Buchman out there used to put me to shame. And I used to notice on the back of the surfer vans that there was this perforated plastic that had little holes in it, and usually on it there were things like palm trees and beaches and sunsets. And I looked at this plastic and I thought how remarkable it would be as an advertising medium. And so I approached the Black Taxi Association in Kledo, and I set up a business partnership with them during apartheid in South Africa. And on that journey I got to experience, and even if one looks around this hall, dare I say, very little level of diversity, I got to experience the most amazing opportunity to work with Black South Africans. And that has forged my career. And today the majority of my company in South Africa is Black owned, and over 60% of my staff are Black. And I think that what we haven't done is absorb the importance of us driving transformation in South Africa. And that brings you to diversity of thought. They say when two people are in a room and they both agree on everything, you only need one of those people. And I think that we don't give enough importance to diversity of thought and the richness of our culture. MNC Saatchi Abel is regarded as the global jewel in the MNC Saatchi crown. And I think a huge amount of that, and the work that you're going to see just now, comes from the diversity of thought that we apply because of the richness of the ethnicity and the cultures and the background of the people in the company. Because the nature of people is swert suk swert, or as my late grandfather would have said, a dislike of the unlike. And I think that that is a tendency that we need to actively fight against in order to lead a more purposeful life in South Africa, if that's where one chooses to live. So I've always been a vigilante against intolerance, and I know that a lot of my colleagues in the ad industry like the fact that I go out on a limb, and it does often cost us business, and as that great saying goes, a principle isn't a principle until it costs you money. And so there I trundle down the hill on my donkey, much like Don Quixote, towards those windmills and tackle anything and everything that has to do with corruption or intolerance. And yet many good people with loud voices sit on their hands and say nothing because it's good for business. And whilst it might be good for business, I believe it's bad for the soul. So I've got involved with the independent media in South Africa and work very closely with the Daily Maverick and support them heavily. Because without the Daily Maverick and Amabungani, today we would still have Jacob Zuma as our president. In fact, we probably would have ended up with a Zuma dynasty. But these brave men and women brought us stories like the Gupta leaks, where for the first time, because the SABC was completely captured, and a lot of the major media groups in South Africa, ANN7 and some that I choose not even to mention, were captured as state propaganda instruments in 2018 in our time. But it was through brave people like the Daily Maverick bringing us these stories that actually forced ahead in terms of ridding this country of Zuma and his cronies. And that is why I think we should support independent media in South Africa. It's incredibly important that we do. And organizations like Alta, who actively fight against the corruption that besets many institutions in our country. So in terms of being a force for good, I think that one has to put one's head up above the parapet. I think you have to, as I say, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. Fortunately, Gray, I think, teaches their boys the moral code and the moral fibre to stand on their own 2 feet. It was not Wilfred Owen, it was Oscar Wilde who said you might as well be yourself because everybody else is already taken. And I think that too many people look for conformity in life in order to determine their success. But it's actually through being yourself and through actually raising your own freak flag and waving it proudly that you actually get to stand out and to be yourself and to determine your own outcome. There's a wonderful story about an old Indian Cherokee chief, and he's talking to his grandson, and he says to his grandson, I have 2 wolves inside of me, and everybody has 2 wolves inside of them. One is evil, he is anger, he is envy, he is sorrow, he is regret, he is inferiority. The other wolf is good, he is kindness, he is joy, he is peace, he is love and hope. And he says to his grandson, that same fight is going on inside of you and inside of every other person. The grandson looks at his grandfather and he says, so which wolf will win? And the grandfather responds, whichever one you feed. And I think that if we live in South Africa, and as a parent, as a grandparent, as a friend, I think it's incumbent on us to deliberately identify that we have these 2 wolves and to choose which one we feed. And it is a choice. Because today, and I thank God, knowing certainly my friends from the class of '84, we never had these things because it worries me, social media today. And given what I do in advertising, I'm very au fait with this tool. But more often than not, it's used as a soapbox for hate versus a soapbox for good. And I think that there's a profound opportunity for us to actively drive good within the world. Which brings me to gratitude, which is the last value that I want to talk about. And dissatisfaction in life is simply the variance between what I have and what I want. That's the gap. So if people are grateful for what they have, they are immediately happy, because you look inwards and you think, how fortunate I am to have this. But unfortunately, with society today and so much pressure, people are always looking over the fence at what other people have, and that is where dissatisfaction creeps in. But I can tell you, having faced numerous challenges in my own life, when you do focus on what you have, you tend to make the right decisions. Graham Smith, the cricketer, was at the agency last week, and he and I were catching up, and he said something very profound. He said, Mike, do you realize that the greatest sportsmen in the world have dealt with failure more often than they have with success? If you are a brilliant cricketer, even the best, like a Sachin Tendulkar, you have faced failure more often than you have faced success, as number one. So when people look at failure as something that defines them, then it takes you down a very rocky road. But when you look at failure simply as a lesson to learn in life, to grow, there's an old Kabbalistic belief that challenges your only opportunity for growth. So if failure is simply a lesson in order to grow, I think that is how you end up being the best cricketer in the world, or end up leading a very successful life. The last parable story I want to share is in December a year ago, we were invited to our friend Robbie Brosen, who started Nando's for Shabbat supper. It's Friday evening dinner. And he had a young rabbi there. And Robbie said to this young guy, would you like to say a few words before dinner? And this young rabbi told us the story that we all know of Pharaoh, who had a dream of the 7 fat cows that emerged from the river, presumably the Nile, I'd imagine, and ate from the fields. And then 7 thin cows came out of the water and ate the 7 fat cows. And Pharaoh was very perturbed by this dream because he didn't understand what it meant. And Joseph said what it means is we're going to have 7 years of plenty, over which we need to store and collect as much food as possible. And then we're going to have 7 years of famine, and we're going to have to use that stored grain. And this young rabbi said he had read a different interpretation of it, and that in our everyday lives, thin cows and fat cows coexist. We have things in our lives that are plentiful, that are rich, that are abundant, and that are happy. And we have things in our lives that cause us stress and cause us misery and cause us anxiety. And the human condition is actually to embrace both of those cows, to know that you never have a period in your life of perfect happiness, that what you do have is always those moments, and you need to actually have struggle in order to have purpose. You need to have struggle in order to reflect and be grateful for your happiness. So I found that a very interesting story that I wanted to share. Now on to the fun part. So I'm going to show you some ads. This first one is, we were very concerned. My offices in Cape Town are in Greenpoint, and there's a homeless shelter, the Haven Night Shelter, around us. And with it being April, we noticed that winter was coming. Not the Game of Thrones, but the stuff that actually allows people, homeless people, to die on our streets. And so we thought, how do we apply our minds and how do we apply our creativity to solve this problem? Let me show you.
South Africa, a country where the haves and have-nots live side by side, but seldom connect. People want to help, but aren't always sure how. And for the homeless, begging is degrading. In partnership with the Haven Night Shelter, the street store was born. The world's first rent-free, premises-free, free pop-up store for the homeless. Somewhere safe to give and easy to collect. Made only from posters, people hang up and drop off donations. Then the homeless choose things they actually want and like. For many used to rummaging in bins, this was their first dignified shopping experience.
Shopping at the street store was for me very nice. The people was accepting me with friendly faces.
A week before the pop-up, we called for donations on social media. Within days, We found ourselves on prominent national blogs, news, radio and TV. But the world wanted in too. Bono's One organization, Huffington Post, Good, and hundreds of others. Thousands of homeless were clothed in South Africa alone, and millions in free PR was generated. More importantly, we brought people together like never before. But homelessness is international, so we went open source.
New way of helping the homeless.
And it's now on Macaulay Avenue in Chattanooga.
A few simple posters to restore the dignity to the homeless in Cape Town suddenly touched the lives of so many more.
You are sent from heaven. Thank you very much. There's no way I can pay you back. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, man.
Every 3 days a street store happens somewhere in the world, and we've managed to clothe over 1 million homeless people, and this year we're going to hit our 1,000th street store. And what's remarkable about that idea is that it encourages generosity of spirit within individuals, because there is a lack of dignity in just dropping off a black bag somewhere and hoping something fits someone. And when you work at the store, it's remarkable. And I've worked at a number of street stores with my wife Sarah and my boys. And the last street store we worked at, Sarah said to me in the car, she said, I just want to tell you that I got more out of working here than the homeless people did. And I thought that that was an incredible thing. So I host a street store, www.streetstore.org. Eric, when you go back to America, you can host a street store for us there. Another major problem that most of us aren't aware of, because we all have Anglo-Saxon names pretty much in this room, is if you have a name like Tsegofatso, every day you sit down to write an email, your computer is going to tell you that your name is a mistake. And that is very degrading. And so together with our client Nando's, we looked at how could we fix this thing? How could people that don't have Anglo-Saxon names be told every day that they're a mistake?
It's not fair. Even when I say Lelo, I get the red line.
It's a Xhosa name, and the computer always get the English name.
The line underneath, like, actually what? Whoa, that's my name.
Who decided that it should be incorrect?
Why is yours more special than mine?
You're not seen as like, it's not a real name.
It's annoying. It's not uncommon names.
We should also be part of the dictionary.
Nando's, the nation's firebrand, whose name also gets the red line, wanted to fix this one name at a time. We asked people to add their names to a database.
Nando's have launched a campaign called #WriteMyName.
The American-based system see any African first name as a misspelling.
Nando's have done something really clever about this. They're calling it Write My Name.
We called on famous South Africans, presenters, politicians and musicians to add their voice to the campaign.
Let's get rid of the red line today.
You know what? I'm removing this.
No more red lines, protect!
Then, in a media first, the nation's largest newspaper allowed us to underline names in their editorial content. The idea fired up the nation. Over 70,000 South Africans added their names to the list. Then, on the 21st of March, Human Rights Day, the names were presented to the people and made available for download. In a few simple steps, computer dictionaries across the country were made more inclusive. Less than 5% of the world have traditional English names. So Nando's launched Write My Name internationally, ensuring our technology is made more inclusive now and for the next generation.
My name is Luto and I feel proud of my name.
We live in a beautiful city here, or for those of us that still, or you, that still live in Nelson Mandela Bay. But the reality is most people don't know what to call the place. Is it Nelson Mandela Bay or is it Port Elizabeth? And my good friend Andrew Barton called me and he said they're running a competition in Nelson Mandela Bay to build a structure, a statue of sorts that would give life to the values of Madiba. And I thought that was a very interesting idea. And so what I did is I phoned a friend of mine, Kuster Jack, who's a well-known businessman here and a struggle icon, and a friend of mine that goes back decades. And I phoned another architect friend of mine, Mokena Makeka, and then together with the executive creative director of my company, Naomi Shicho, and another friend of mine, Greg Scott, we applied our minds. And Jason Harrison. And Jason is also an old grey boy. He matriculated in 1995 and is the managing director of my Cape Town agency. And we thought, how do we solve this problem? Because the reality is the name Nelson Mandela is the most famous name in the world of a statesman. When Madiba died, his funeral was attended by more royalty and more presidents than any other passing statesman in history. Quite a thing. So wherever you are in the world, you say, I come from Nelson Mandela Bay, people will know. If you say I come from Port Elizabeth, the reality is people think it's probably related to Queen Elizabeth. As it happens, it's got nothing to do with Queen Elizabeth at all. It has to do with Lady Elizabeth Donkin, who happened to die in India. And Sir Rufus Donkin, when he came here, named the city after his wife. And then in memory of her dying in India, he built a pyramid on the Donkin Reserve. I thought pyramids came from Egypt. I don't know why he didn't build the Taj Mahal. It would have been better for tourism in this area. But we looked at this problem and we thought, how do we create a structure here that honors Madiba?
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
The story of Nelson Mandela is not only a story of one man, it is a story of a collective sacrifice by a nation on its long, difficult walk towards freedom. It is a story of hope, a call to all of us to seek the light within, a light that may lead us towards a better tomorrow. The Nelson Mandela Tower of Light is an embodiment of this spirit. With 27 flights of stairs for every year Madiba spent in prison, we recreate this rite of passage with a beacon of light that stands 27 stories high. This vertical journey leads visitors to 3 destinations. A pre-prison section where the visitor can learn about the friends that influenced the man who would become the symbol of hope for the entire world. Further up the stairs is a section which marks the second stage of imprisonment. This is a silent section representing the banned voice of the people's leader, a silence which creates the feeling of solitude that he experienced in confinement. The last section, the pinnacle of the structure, is at 81 meters above the ground. It is here, on the top floor, that the spirit of freedom is captured in a space of reflection. The journey upwards is also a sonic experience. The visitor is greeted by the sounds of Kunu, snippets from the Rivonia trial, Madiba's anecdotes and speeches to the nation as the visitor ascends towards the light. Our logo takes its design cues from the stairs that symbolize the icon's long walk to freedom and patterns that evoke the African spirit. This logo is a fitting iconography for Madiba, the son of the soil who would become the light of the world. So welcome to the Nelson Mandela Tower of Light, the first step towards a brighter future for the people of Nelson Mandela Bay, for our country and the world.
So it is our fervent belief that if we do actually build this structure in Nelson Mandela Bay, that it could change the prospects of the city. It could formally drop the name Port Elizabeth, and it could be a catalyst to economic development because it would rival one of the great icons of the world. Sydney has the Opera House, Paris has the Eiffel Tower, New York has the Statue of Liberty. This could be the thing on the African continent that people would want to come to. And there's a whole program around this that builds the local economy and builds local industry. So try and get behind it. At the moment, the city is doing a feasibility study and hopefully it comes to light. No pun intended. The last ad I'm going to show you is, I think with the elections a couple of days ago is probably most pertinent. From 2008 until 2018, our country was in the grips of a very questionable group of people, President and his friends from India. And together with our client Nando's, we decided to do something about it. We decided to inspire the nation in order to be able to tackle the negativity and to say that we are a resilient nation and together we can do something extraordinary. And so we did this ad.
South Africans can do anything. We can end hundreds of years of oppression. And we can get lost lovers back in 2 days. We can lose our minds. And we can change them. We can make it. Oh, but we can fake it. We can forgive. And we can be forgiven. Right? We can lose our money and we can get some of it back. We can get new finance ministers faster than we can get new eyebrows. We can perform miracles and make miraculous recoveries. We can believe in superheroes, but some things unbelievable. We can feel doomed and then be on top of the world. Bon, in South Africa, we've always fixed our shit.
Hope we have enough cash.
And we can fix our shit again.
No, man. Why is this thing so big? Okay, I'm driving. I got the keys. What about me? No, sorry for you.
And I think what's interesting and the brave thing that Nando's did is showing that Gupta's running away from South Africa happened while Jacob Zuma was our president and 3 months before the Guptas ran away from South Africa. So sometimes life can imitate art. I hope taking you down this bit of a journey has been meaningful. A lot of people say to me, Mike, how do you get to do so much stuff? Because in addition to this, we also do make ads for Heineken and takealot.com and Hollard and a whole lot of different things. And I love this quote by Hunter S. Thompson, which is faster, 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 until the thrill of speed overcomes the fear of death. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Give him the gift.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks very much, boys. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.